President Trump not backing down from his push to take over Greenland. We have to have it. They have to have this done. European countries reportedly considering a trade bazooka against the US for threatening tariffs over Greenland. My sense is if they want to double and triple down, this president never backs off. Will the Europeans negotiate or retaliate? Starting February 1st, brand new tariffs are set to go into effect across Europe, all because the United States wants to acquire a country that most people didn't expect, Greenland. That's right, in a completely unprecedented turn of events, Greenland is quickly becoming one of the most strategic acquisitions of the 21st century. And despite the media covering this like crazy, most people are completely unaware of what's happening, how this is causing a rush into safe haven assets like gold and silver, and how this is about to impact everything from the price of everyday items, the stock market, and even the value of the US dollar. That's why we urgently need to discuss exactly what's going on, why Greenland is considered a national security issue, and how this could start the beginning of a much bigger trade war. Because the reality is this next week is going to decide whether or not the rest of the world plays along or strikes back. To get a full understanding of what's actually happening, let's begin with 1. National security. As of now, Greenland is home to a major US defense installation with roughly 150 American troops stationed there, and it's considered a key early warning location for anything coming over the Arctic. However, Trump argues that this isn't enough, and that if Russia or China ever tried to expand their influence on the region, the United States can't afford to be reacting after the fact. In his view, Greenland and Europe can't realistically defend it on its own without the help of the US government. So the choice is simple. Either the US takes over control now, or it risks watching rivals take over after the fact. Which leads us to 2. Rare earth minerals. The fact is, Greenland currently holds one of the largest untapped reserves of rare earth minerals. Once people start losing faith in our entire system, money flows out into alternative assets or other countries who pick up where we left off. So with all of this going on, we have to ask ourselves, what is the realistic likelihood that Trump actually acquires Greenland? Well, when it comes to this, there are really just 3 options. The first one being the US purchases Greenland outright. In this scenario, the US pays Denmark, Denmark signs the deed gets transferred, and American flags go up. But again, like I said earlier, for this to be legally binding, the people of Greenland would need to agree, which is highly unlikely. And even though nothing is impossible, I would say realistically this probably isn't going to happen. Now, option 2 is that the United States gets to control Greenland without owning it. Here's the thing, even though Trump says we have to have it, that doesn't necessarily imply ownership on paper. This could simply just mean military expansion, mineral agreements, Arctic bases, strategic control, or a footprint that makes it US-controlled in everything except for the ownership. To me, this is probably the most realistic of happening, especially if it comes with a security agreement or some sort of long-term protection, and I would say this could end up happening at some point in the future. Or we just have option 3. Nothing happens, and within a few months, everyone's forgotten about it and has moved on. As we've all seen time and time again, a lot of these have just turned into a negotiation tactic, where Trump asks such a huge thing up front and then eventually compromises to something that he wanted from the very beginning. Basically, I think all of this is just another line item in what's called the Trump playbook. Interest in Greenland is really nothing new. Like, even back in the 1860s, Andrew Johnson attempted to acquire it with the intention of encouraging Canada to also join the United States, but that failed. Then again, in World War II, the United States applied the Monroe Doctrine to be able. This could theoretically block some of America's access to European markets or impose export controls, saying that tariff threats undermine transatlantic relations and risk a dangerous downward spiral. Trump more recently doubled down, saying that we have to have it. France's finance minister replied, "We are living through uncharted territories. We've never seen this before." An ally, a friend of 250 years, is considering using tariffs as a geopolitical weapon. Even Germany went on record to say that a line had been crossed. Europe must be prepared. Separate from that, logistically, there's also the issue of Greenland itself, where even though it is technically under the control of Denmark, the Danish constitution does not allow the sale of a territory without a referendum from Greenland's people.
So even if Denmark agrees to sell Greenland to the United States, the people of Greenland also have to agree with it. This is why the markets are reacting like we're about to see another trade war. Stocks are declining, the dollar is selling off, precious metals like gold and silver are skyrocketing to new highs. And if Europe actually fires back with that trade bazooka, what happens next isn't just a trade war, it's a global chain reaction that's about to affect prices, supply chains, and investments faster than anyone could expect. So what would this mean for your money and portfolio? You cannot rely on the economy to come save you. Instead, it's going to take control, discipline, and consistency over what you're already spending. Now, in terms of what's happening in the markets and how this is realistically going to play out, let's talk about safe haven investing. At the time of filming, gold has jumped to an all-time high of more than $4,700 an ounce. Silver followed closely behind at nearly $100 an ounce. Here's the key point that everyone needs to be made aware of. When the world's largest economy threatens its own allies with a trade war, the situation around Greenland highlights a deeper shift in global power dynamics. What was once seen as an isolated and frozen territory has now become a focal point for military strategy, economic leverage, and geopolitical influence. The interest is no longer symbolic. It reflects growing competition over resources, control of Arctic routes, and long-term security planning. When major powers begin to pressure allies instead of adversaries, it sends a signal that traditional alliances are being tested. This uncertainty forces markets, governments, and investors to reassess their positions. Confidence becomes fragile, diplomacy turns transactional, and every move is interpreted as a potential escalation. Whether or not any formal agreement is reached, the message is already clear. Control over strategic regions is becoming more aggressive, and the consequences will likely extend far beyond borders, affecting global stability, trade relationships, and economic trust for years to come. Beyond the immediate headlines, the Greenland dispute reveals how economic pressure has become a primary tool of modern geopolitics. Tariffs, trade restrictions, and strategic threats are no longer last resort options, but opening moves in negotiation. This approach reshapes how countries interact, shifting from cooperation toward calculated leverage. Smaller nations find themselves caught between larger powers, while global markets react to every statement and counterstatement. Over time, repeated use of economic pressure risks normalizing instability, where uncertainty becomes the baseline rather than the exception. As trust erodes, nations begin prioritizing self-protection over collaboration, accelerating fragmentation in global trade and finance. Even if tensions eventually cool, the precedents set by this moment may influence how future conflicts unfold, making economic confrontation.
The situation also highlights how geopolitical ambitions are increasingly tied to economic leverage rather than traditional military force. Tariffs, sanctions, and trade restrictions have become tools to influence outcomes without direct confrontation. While this approach may avoid immediate conflict, it carries long-term consequences for global cooperation. Supply chains that once relied on stability and trust are now being redesigned with political risk in mind. Companies diversify production, investors demand higher returns for uncertainty, and governments prioritize self-sufficiency over efficiency. As a result, the global economy becomes less interconnected, more fragmented, and ultimately more expensive for consumers worldwide. The debate over Greenland also exposes a deeper shift in how power is measured in the modern world. Control over resources, shipping routes, and strategic geography is now just as important as economic size or military strength. So the real question isn't just about Greenland, tariffs, or political pressure. It's about what happens when uncertainty becomes the new normal. As global powers test limits and alliances are pushed to their breaking point, the consequences ripple far beyond borders. Markets react, trust weakens, and everyday people feel the impact long before any final decision is made.
Whether this ends in compromise, escalation, or silence, one thing is clear: the world is entering a phase where every move matters, and the next step could reshape the balance far more than anyone expects.